The day my boss fired me so his mistress could sit in my chair, security waited by the glass door. HR had a folder with my name on it, and in the bottom drawer of my desk slept a claws sharper than any knife I could carry. Before we continue, don't forget to hit subscribe and drop a comment. Where are you watching from today? Have you ever been humiliated at work but stayed calm, waiting for the right moment? Tell your story below. I'd love to read it. My name is Jane. For 7 years, I ran operations like a backstage conductor. Quiet, steady, invisible to the audience until the show fell apart. It never did. We were a $10 million company, small enough that the CEO shook hands with every client, big enough that mistakes echoed. I made sure we didn't make them. I knew our vendors by first name, our freight schedules by heart, and the brittle sound a warehouse floor makes when a pallet is stacked 2 inches too high. At 8:03 a.m., my calendar pinged. 9 a.m., quick catch-up with Richard. The subject line wore that informal smile bosses use when they already made a decision without you. Richard's office was a glass cube with a view that made visitors forgive his personality. He stood when I walked in, a performance habit of his, chin lifted like the city skyline belonged to him. Clara was there too, perched on the low sofa, crossing her legs in a way that made the room rearrange itself around her. She'd joined us 6 months ago as a strategic consultant. People said the word strategic to avoid saying affair. Jane, Richard began, pushing a sheet of paper across the desk. We're restructuring. Restructuring. That corporate foghorn. The paper had my name at the top and a sentence in the middle drawn with a scalpel. Your position has been eliminated effective immediately. HR, Dana, appeared in the doorway with a folder and a smile that didn't touch her eyes. Behind her, a security guard leaned his shoulder casually against the wall like the last page of a book was already written. I looked at Richard. You're eliminating operations? Consolidating into a more agile function, he said. It makes sense to streamline under a new umbrella. His gaze slid, traitorously, to Clara. Clara tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and watched me, not with malice, exactly. With curiosity. Like I was a specimen she'd studied for a while, and now wanted to see move. I didn't let my mouth ask the questions my stomach was asking. Instead, I looked at the paper, then at them, and said, Noted. Dana cleared her throat. We'll need your key card and your laptop. You can box your personal items. We'll escort you. I nodded. My tongue tasted like copper. I had trained myself for years to blink slowly when insulted, to let time stretch between stimulus and response. It's a survival skill for women in rooms where decisions are made with a wink. On the way back to my office, the hallway felt longer than usual. Posters about teamwork watched me leave. We rise by lifting others. The irony would have been funny if it weren't so carefully designed. Jane, someone whispered as I passed the break room. Priya from finance, eyes wide. Is it true? I gave the smallest nod. Her jaw tightened. She sent her gaze straight through the glass and into Richard's office, like a laser. I kept walking. My office had always been functional. A standing desk, a second monitor for spreadsheets, a plant that refused to die. On the wall, a whiteboard with a neat grid of vendor deliverables, color-coded with dates. It looked like the cockpit of a plane that had landed itself. I set the HR folder down and exhaled. The air tasted of lemon polish and failure. Do you want boxes? Dana asked from the doorway. I won't need many, I said. There isn't much that's mine. That wasn't entirely true. There was the photo of my sister and me laughing on a pier. The ceramic mug with a crack near the handle that fit my finger perfectly. The tiny brass key that lived under a sticky note in my top drawer, a key no one knew I had. And there was the bottom drawer. It slid open with a sound that always felt private to me, like a stage curtain moving in the dark. Inside, neatly labeled project binders, a ring of vendor contract copies, a small black notebook of shipping anomalies, and one buff-colored folder that did not belong to anyone but me. Which is to say, it belonged to the company and I belonged to me. Collins / vendor master agreement, executed. The paper was heavier than most of the things I'd carried here. It had the weight of detail. My signature at the bottom. Richard's signature above. Mr. Collins's signature in crisp blue ink. And, buried 2/3 down the page, near where tired eyes stop reading, Section 14, see change of authorized signatory, material term. If the authorized signatory named in Exhibit A, that would be me, were replaced, the vendor had the right to terminate without penalty and claw back preferential rates already enjoyed. It wasn't an accidental clause. I had put it there on purpose during a tense week when Collins's lawyers kept changing commas to move money. I wanted leverage against a future where someone reckless tried to shove me out of a relationship I had painstakingly kept fair. We all put little life preservers into our work, sometimes without knowing which storm they'll meet. I touched the page with a thumb that trembled and told myself, not now. Not yet. Jane. Dana again. I'll give you a moment. Security will wait by the elevators. Thank you, I said and meant it. There are people whose jobs place them between cruelty and consequence. They don't deserve your aim. I packed. The photo, the mug, the plant, the notebook, the tiny brass key. The buff folder I slid into my tote under my cardigan, the way a person tucks a letter from a friend inside a book. Did it count as mine? No. Did it count as necessary? Ask me again in a week. As I zipped the bag, laughter leaked through the glass wall. I didn't need to turn to know its shape. Clara's voice, bright and smooth, practicing an apology for the team that would never quite land as an apology. Richard's lower register. A scrape of a chair. For a dizzy second I saw her in my chair, leaning back, pretending the cushion had always known the angles of her spine. There are moments when panic wants to eat you. I let it nibble at the edge of my sleeve, and then I fed it a list instead. Call my sister, update my resume, return the company credit card, breathe in, breathe out, walk. I walked. Past Priya, who pretended to scroll, but whose eyes were wet. Past Marco from sales, who gave me a nod men reserve for soldiers. Past the showroom where the new client brochures glowed with promises we might not keep anymore. At reception, the elevator doors were two mirrors facing each other. I didn't look at myself. I looked at the lobby instead. Collins, in a navy coat, scarf loose at the throat, reading with the annoyed concentration of a man whose time was money and whose money behaved on a schedule. He looked up and saw me. His mouth softened into recognition. Jane, he said, voice low. Everything all right? There it was again. The decision between telling the whole truth and carrying it a little further, like a glass of water, filled too high. I'll be in touch, I said. My voice was steady. The elevator arrived. The doors opened. Please do, he said, and if there was one thing I had learned about men like him, it was that they rarely said please. The elevator accepted me. The doors closed. My face reflected back at me now, somewhere between pale and clear. Behind me, the security guards stared at the numbers as they lit. 7, 6, 5. People think security is about force. Most days, it's about witness. We reached the ground floor, and the cool of the lobby reached for my wrists. Outside, the city exhaled a bus and a gust of wind and 3 people arguing about a lunch order. I stepped into it like a swimmer into water, the shock on my skin turning into decision. On the curb, my phone buzzed. A text from unknown. I heard what happened. I'm sorry. Priya, probably. Another from a number I recognized. Richard. Please remember your NDA obligations and return any company property immediately. Of course. I slipped my phone away and looked at the tote on my shoulder. It didn't feel heavy. It felt like a grip. Across the street, above the deli with a perfect coffee, our building rose into the kind of indifferent blue that makes you either dream bigger or go home. I watched my floor. It watched me back. In the corner office, a shape moved in front of the glass wall, bright color against the neutral palette. Red, maybe. Clara's dress. My former chair. You don't get to have me, I whispered, and I didn't mean Richard. I meant the story. I caught the next bus, without checking the schedule. I stood because every seat felt too still for the blood in my legs. The city blurred, then sharpened, then blurred again, as if asking me what I wanted to focus on. Section 14, C. reappeared in my mind like a lighthouse blink, steady and deliberate. I imagined the meeting upstairs that would follow. Richard clearing his throat, introducing Clara as the interim head of operations, saying words like synergy and fresh perspective. I imagined Priya's jaw set in polite granite, Marco's eyes narrowing, the interns pretending to take notes while texting each other the obvious. I imagined the email Clara would send at 10:34 a.m. requesting vendor access, authorizations, passwords, signatory updates. I imagined the auto-responses bouncing back like rubber bullets, request denied. Authorized signatory, J. M. Jane. See Exhibit A. For changes, consult Section 14C. The bus rocked. My hand tightened around the pole, the metal warm from other hands. I let myself smile. Not the kind of smile people use to survive a meeting. The kind you let yourself have when the orchestra in your chest stops tuning and plays the first note clean. At home, I set the plant on my kitchen table. I washed the mug like a small ceremony and made tea. I placed the buff folder on the counter and didn't open it. I didn't need to. I could see every line of it with my eyes closed. The kettle clicked. My phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. Miss Parker? This is Collins's office. He asked me to schedule time with you. Are you available this afternoon? I looked at the clock. 11:12 a.m. I thought of the elevator numbers again, marching downward. People think descent is always a bad thing. Sometimes you have to go down to find the lever that turns off the power. Yes, I typed. 2:30 works. Perfect. Conference room B. He'll see you then. I sipped my tea. The city hummed in the walls. A siren wailed at a distance, fading until it was just another thread in the braid. I stood in my own kitchen, as if I were visiting for the first time. The calm was real, but it had an edge. I picked up the tiny brass key and rolled it against my palm. It had opened a file drawer that no one ever asked about, because I never gave them a reason to. That was my magic trick. Make excellence so boring that the careless fall asleep. By 2:20 I was back in the building, past the receptionist who didn't look up, down the hall to conference room B where the glass walls made secrets develop better posture. Collins arrived at 2:31, right on time for a man who measured minutes in invoiceable units. Jane, he said, closing the door. Your email was too concise. I'm practicing. I sat. He didn't. I was in the lobby this morning, he said. I saw you leave. I know, I said. You asked if I was all right. He waited. People like him don't like to be told stories. They like to be offered frameworks. I was terminated, I said. Effective immediately. They're consolidating operations under a new umbrella. Clara, he said. Not a question. I tilted my head. You always were observant. He set his phone face down and folded his hands. I don't like surprises, Jane. I don't either. I leaned forward slightly. Do you remember Section 14C? His eyes sharpened, the way a lens makes the world more precise. The authorized signatory clause. Yes. A silence bloomed and filled the corners of the room. On the other side of the glass, an intern hurried past, clutching a stack of printouts, like the past could be stapled to the present. Collins tapped a finger against the table, just once. You anticipated this. I anticipated something, I said. I hoped I wouldn't need it. And now? Now, I said, they have a choice. Honor the relationship as written, authorize signatory intact, or trigger the termination and clawback you negotiated and I agreed to. He nodded slowly, absorbing the outline of a storm that hadn't yet broken. And Richard? Richard thinks agile is a synonym for careless, I said. He didn't read to page 9. Collins allowed himself the smallest smile. Most don't. The door opened a crack. His assistant slid a note inside, without looking up. He glanced at it and set it down. He'd like me to move forward this afternoon with the new signatory, Collins said, almost idly. I looked at the buff folder in my tote, and then at him. Then I should probably send you an email, I said, before you reply. He nodded once. Do that. I stood. My legs were steady. The room felt different, like someone had corrected its tilt. At the door, he said, "Jane?" I turned. "People like Richard think money makes them brave." He paused. "Paper makes me brave." "Then you and I said, "have the same courage." I left the room with the kind of quiet that sounds loud if you're listening for it. My phone was already in my hand. My thumb hovered above the keyboard. Subject: Notice Re. Section 14C. I typed the first line and stopped, not because I was unsure, but because I wanted to feel, one last time, the soft thud of a decision landing. When I hit send, it didn't feel like revenge. It felt like gravity. The morning after my firing, I woke up earlier than usual. Habit. My body was still set to the rhythm of operations, warehouse calls, supply chain pings, the constant dance of making sure things arrived when and where they should. Only now I had no calls to answer, no spreadsheets to fix. Just silence, sharp enough to cut. But the silence wasn't empty. It was loaded. I had the buff-colored folder on my kitchen table, the one with Section 14C, glowing in my mind like a warning light. I sipped my tea slowly. My phone buzzed, a voicemail from Priya in finance. "Jane, I just want you to know people saw what happened. We know it wasn't fair. If you ever need references or anything, call me." The support warmed me for a moment, but then I thought of Richard and Clara sitting in my office, probably trying to log into systems that would slam doors in their faces. Every request would hit the same wall. Authorized signatory, Jane Parker. See Exhibit A. I wasn't imagining it. I knew exactly what would happen. By noon, my phone rang again. This time, not a whisper of sympathy. A direct call. "Collins." "Jane," he said, his voice smooth but edged with interest. "We should meet. I want clarity on this transition." Transition. That word again. The polite mask companies wear when they're cutting off limbs. "Of course," I replied, calm. "When?" "Today. 3 o'clock. My office." It wasn't a request. His building was taller than ours, sleeker, marble floors polished until you could drown in them. His assistant led me into a glass-walled room. Collins arrived precisely at 3, carrying only a pen and his phone. "I'll get straight to it," he said, sliding into the chair opposite me. "Richard called this morning." He introduced Clara as the new head of operations. I didn't move. I let the silence stretch. But when we sent over documents for authorization, he tapped his pen against the table once, sharp. Her signature was rejected. "System flagged you as the only valid signatory." He leaned forward. "You want to tell me why?" I met his eyes. Section 14C. Recognition flickered across his face, like a man remembering a chess move he underestimated years ago. "You slipped that clause in." "I protected our deal," I said. "For both of us. I knew one day Richard might get reckless." Collins smiled, a thin, precise line. "So, technically, he cannot move forward without you." "Correct. And if he tries?" "The contract allows you to terminate immediately and demand repayment of preferential rates." He leaned back, chuckling quietly. "That would gut him." "It would," I said. There was a pause, heavy with calculations. Finally, Collins said, "Jane, I've seen many people pushed aside in business. Most stay quiet. You didn't scream. You didn't cry. You prepared." He tapped his pen again, slower this time. "I respect that." I stayed silent. Respect was nice. Power was better. He continued, "Richard's empire rests on this deal. Without it, he's paper thin. What do you want me to do?" I looked down at my hands, steady on the table. "I want you to do what's best for your company. Enforce the contract." He raised an eyebrow. "And you?" "I'll be fine," I said. "But Richard won't be." As I left his office, my phone buzzed again. This time, a desperate message from Richard himself. "Jane, we need to talk. Please call me back. Urgent." I didn't reply. "Not yet." I walked out into the cool afternoon air with the city swirling around me, horns and footsteps and chatter. But under it all, there was a hum only I could hear, the sound of an empire beginning to crack. The day Richard realized the deal was collapsing, his $10 million empire didn't crumble in silence. It screamed, and every echo reached me. 3 days passed. Long enough for panic to ferment in Richard's office, short enough that I still woke at dawn with the phantom buzz of calendar reminders. On the fourth morning, my phone lit up with a string of unread emails, half of them forwards from colleagues, the other half FYI notes from vendors I'd built relationships with over the years. Each email told the same story in different fonts: authorizations blocked, invoices on hold, shipments delayed. Richard had tried to force Clara's name through the system. Collins's lawyers had sent back the same response, again and again: unauthorized. Contract violation risk. The cracks were widening. At noon, I received a call from Priya. Her voice trembled between worry and awe. "Jane, you won't believe this," she whispered. Richard just had a meltdown in the boardroom. He blamed Clara in front of everyone. He slammed a chair. I could picture it. Richard's face red, veins tight, his control snapping. Clara trying to maintain poise, her charm unraveling under pressure. The board shifting in their seats, watching not a leader, but a man cornered. "He's calling it sabotage," Priya continued. "But Collins won't budge." He told Richard in front of everyone, "A contract is a contract." Her laugh was nervous, quick. "Jane, people are starting to say your name again. Like you never really left." I let the silence hum before I answered. "That's because I never did." That evening, while I was making dinner, another call came. This time it wasn't sympathy. It was fury. "Richard, you think you're clever, don't you?" He spat before I could speak. "Collins says the contract is invalid without you. This is your mess, Jane. Fix it." I held the phone a little away from my ear, his voice loud enough to rattle the kitchen tiles. "Richard," I said calmly, "I don't work for you anymore. Remember? You'll regret this. You think you can play games with me? With Clara? We built this company." "No," I said, letting the words land like stones in water. "I built the part that worked. You built the part that's falling apart." The silence that followed was jagged. Then click. He hung up. By the next morning, news had started leaking outside the company. Small trade journals first, then local business blogs. A headline: $10 million supply chain giant faces contract crisis. CEO silent. Silent. Except I knew he wasn't. Inside the glass tower, he was screaming, clawing, blaming Clara, blaming the board, blaming everyone but himself. I spent the afternoon walking through the city. The air crisp, the noise strangely distant. Every block I walked, I thought of pallets not moving, trucks idling, clients calling with rising anger. I imagined Clara sitting in my chair, fingers trembling over a keyboard that wouldn't obey her. Empires don't explode all at once. They crack, quietly, piece by piece, until the walls can't hold. And I was watching every crack form. That night, I received another message. This time not from Richard, not from Priya, not from Collins. It was from a board member. "Jane, we'd like to speak with you. Discretion is appreciated." When the board called me in secret, I knew Richard's empire wasn't just cracking. It was begging me to push. The message from the board sat on my phone like a loaded gun. "Jane, we'd like to speak with you. Discretion is appreciated." For hours, I stared at it. They weren't reaching out of kindness. They were reaching out because Richard's grip was slipping and they needed a steady hand. The irony wasn't lost on me. 1 week ago, I was disposable. Now I was essential. I typed back 2 words. "Tomorrow morning." The next day, I walked through the familiar lobby. This time, no security guard followed me. No HR folder waited. Instead, an assistant led me straight to the 12th floor, boardroom level. Inside, 7 men and women sat around a long mahogany table, their expressions polished but strained. The air smelled of coffee and desperation. "Jane," the chairwoman, Mrs. Ellison, began. "Thank you for coming." I nodded. I didn't offer pleasantries. Let them feel the imbalance for once. "We've been informed by Collins and his team that the contract cannot proceed without your authorization," she said carefully. "This has put us in a precarious position." "Precarious?" I asked softly. "Your trucks are idle. Your clients are furious. Collins is considering termination. Precarious sounds polite. Several of them shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Ellison continued. We want to understand what you require in order to assist us. The doors slammed open. Richard stormed in, face flushed, tie askew. Clara trailed behind, pale but trying to look composed. This is ridiculous, he barked. Jane doesn't work here anymore. We don't need her permission. She's doing this to spite me. I stayed silent, watching him unravel in front of his own board. Richard, Mrs. Ellison said coolly, the contract is binding. Collins won't move until Jane approves. You put us in this position. His eyes snapped to me. You're enjoying this, aren't you? I tilted my head. I'm surviving it. There's a difference. Clara touched his arm, whispering something. He shook her off, the gesture so violent it echoed in the silence. Mrs. Ellison turned back to me. Jane, if you would consider returning, even temporarily, we could stabilize the situation. You know the systems. You know the vendors. You know Collins trusts you. It was the closest thing to an apology I would ever get. I leaned forward, folding my hands. If I return, I want it on my terms. Richard laughed bitterly. She's bluffing. She doesn't have the leverage. Collins's voice cut through the speakerphone in the center of the table. No warning, no introduction. He had been listening the whole time. She has all the leverage, he said flatly. And if she doesn't get what she wants, I walk. And when I walk, your company folds. The room froze. Richard's face drained of color. Clara stared at the floor. My terms are simple, I said, my voice steady. Richard resigns. Effective immediately. Clara goes with him. I take control of operations, with a direct reporting line to the board, not the CEO. And I want a seat at this table. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush. Richard exploded. Over my dead body. Mrs. Ellison's eyes didn't leave mine. Agreed. Richard spun toward her, betrayed. You can't. I just did, she said. You've put us in a $10 million crisis. Jane is the only way out. For the first time, Richard looked small. His empire, his pride, his arrogance, it was slipping away, right in front of him. I stood, gathering my bag. You'll have my answer tomorrow, I said. I want to see how badly this company really wants to survive. And then I walked out, leaving Richard to drown in his own rage, Clara to pick at the pieces of her ambition, and the board to taste the first drop of humility in years. By the time Richard realized I wasn't coming back, his $10 million empire was already in free fall, and I was the one holding the final thread. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of fear, because of clarity. For years, I had been the quiet architect of Richard's success. He smiled at clients, took photos in glossy magazines, played the role of visionary. Meanwhile, I kept the gears moving, the contract signed, the vendors loyal. He thought firing me would erase that truth. Instead, it exposed it. By morning, emails flooded my inbox from old colleagues. Shipments still blocked. Clients threatening lawsuits. Vendors refusing to negotiate with anyone but me. The empire was collapsing, not in one dramatic explosion, but in the steady, merciless grind of contracts, clauses, and obligations he didn't understand. At 9 a.m., Mrs. Ellison called again. Her voice was crisp, but desperation leaked through the edges. Jane, she said, the board convened last night. We voted unanimously to accept your terms. Richard will be asked to step down. Clara as well. You will be reinstated with a board seat. For a moment, I let the silence hang. This was everything I had asked for, everything Richard swore I could never have. But then I remembered the taste of humiliation, the way HR slid the termination paper across the desk, the way security shadowed me like a criminal. You're too late, I said softly. I don't want the seat. I want freedom. Jane, please, without you, the company. That's not my problem anymore. And I ended the call. By noon, the messages from Richard began. First voicemails, then texts, then emails in all caps. You won't win. I made you. Come back or you'll regret it. but mixed in with his rage were the cracks of fear. Please, Jane, just help me fix this one thing. Collins won't answer my calls. The board is turning on me. Clara's gone. I can't do this without you. I read them all, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I felt tall enough to watch his empire crumble beneath me. That afternoon, I sat across from Collins in his office. You have the right to terminate, I reminded him. The clause is clear. If you want out, now is the time. Collins tapped his pen on the desk. Richard tried to bribe me yesterday. Pathetic. You've proven yourself far more valuable. So, what will you do? I asked. He smiled thinly. Terminate. With a single signature, Collins cut the cord. Millions in contracts dissolved. Preferential rates clawed back. Cash reserves Richard didn't have evaporated overnight. The empire wasn't just wobbling anymore, it was dust. That evening, the news broke. CEO Richard Hale resigns amid contract scandal. Company faces bankruptcy. I watched the headline on my phone as I sipped tea in my quiet apartment. No glass towers, no boardrooms, no HR folders. Just peace. Richard had wanted me erased. Instead, he was the one erased from the company, from the empire he thought was untouchable, from the pedestal he built on arrogance. And me? I still had the mug with the crack, the plant on my table, and a future unchained from his shadow. I thought Richard's empire had died with his resignation, but men like him never go quietly. His last attempt to drag me down was the moment I proved I'd already won. It was 2 weeks after the headline. CEO Richard Hale resigns amid contract scandal. Company faces bankruptcy. I was finally breathing again. My mornings were filled with quiet tea instead of tense calendars, my nights with peace instead of late-night calls. Then came the knock. Sharp, urgent. I opened the door. Richard stood there. Gone was the polished suit, the expensive watch, the smug grin. He looked hollow, eyes sunken, tie loose like it had strangled him on the way over. Jane, he said. We need to talk. I didn't invite him in. I let him stand in the hallway, lit by the flickering bulb that made his face look more desperate than powerful. You destroyed me, he hissed, but his voice cracked. Clara's gone. The board betrayed me. Collins, he won't even take my calls. Do you know what it's like to lose everything? I looked at him for a long moment. Yes, I said softly. The day you fired me, I lost everything I thought I had. But I didn't break. I built myself back. His lips trembled. You could fix this. You always fix things. Just one more time. Help me, please. For a split second, I saw the man he once pretended to be, the confident leader, the one who convinced me I was safe under his roof. But then I remembered the paper slid across the desk, the HR folder, the security guard, the humiliation. I remembered his laughter when Clara sat in my chair. No, I said. Desperation twisted in his eyes. He straightened, forcing his shoulders back, trying to summon the old arrogance. If you don't help me, I'll tell people you orchestrated this. That you sabotaged the company. That you were jealous and vindictive. I almost laughed. You think they'll believe you? He faltered. He knew the truth. Collins knew. The board knew. Even the employees had seen through him. His threats had become echoes, bouncing back on himself. You're finished, Richard, I said. Not because of me. Because of you. For a long moment, he stood there, breathing heavy, eyes darting like a trapped animal. Then I stepped back and said, goodbye. And I closed the door. On the other side, I heard the weight of him sliding down the wall, the muffled sound of a man who had finally met the silence he'd tried to give me. I poured myself another cup of tea. The plant on my table caught the morning sun. My cracked mug fit perfectly in my hand. Richard's empire was gone. Clara was gone. The board had salvaged what they could, but without me, it was only scraps. And me? I was free. Sometimes revenge isn't fire or fury. Sometimes it's simply refusing to return when the door they slammed in your face swings back open. That was my victory. My silence. My peace. So tell me, would you have let him inside? Or would you have closed the door like I did? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you enjoyed this journey, subscribe for more stories of betrayal, revenge, and redemption.